All right, welcome everyone. I'm really glad to see all of you who are joining Dana Golden for this ride sharing options program, which is really important. I'm Tracy Sprower from Met How at Home. This is part of our Get Ready series where we're working to be more proactive just to meet all the challenges and the opportunities of aging in our own homes and staying independent in this rural place. And transportation is definitely one of those places where there's opportunities to connect with more people through ride sharing, but it also can be really challenging to, especially if you can't drive anymore and you live more outside of town, things like that. So I'm really looking forward to this program and also to the possibilities of our brainstorming session, because it's just amazing what can happen when we put our brains together and storm. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Dana. Also, welcome to Natalia, who is an intern in the Sustainability Pathways program with Western, and she's working with Resilient Met How on the Climate Action Plan. And that's a huge piece of what we're trying to look ahead to as well. You know, what are we looking at in terms of shifts and changes in our climate, and how can we change our behavior and lower our emissions? That's a huge piece of why we're here today. So I don't want to fail to mention that. And so now I really will pass it to you, Dana, to introduce yourself, and thanks so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. And thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited. I have some slides and presentation, and then I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with everyone. So my name's Dana. I'm zooming in from Mazama, and I've been I'm going to introduce myself, and then I would love to hear from everybody just a brief, like your name and what about the topic of transportation piqued your interest, so that we can hear from everybody. I have been working for the last about 6 months or so with on the Metro Valley Climate Action Plan, which some of you may have been involved in helping to create and give input on. And there's a lot in that plan. We now have an initiative called Resilient Metro that's really thinking about what does it mean for us to be resilient going forward as a community, both to respond to climate change and reduce our emissions. And Metro at Home does a lot to make our community more resilient and help us be able to take care of each other. So I feel like it's a really good kind of combination to talk about this issue. And then I guess specifically what interests me about transportation, I think transportation is probably one of my least favorite parts about living in the Metro Valley. I grew up in Seattle, and it's not amazing there, but just in terms of having options to get around and socialize and get to events, especially coming from Mazama, it's really hard to not be car centric. So I think, and when I think about climate and when I think about something that I rely on every day, transportation is a big one. And I love this valley, and I would love for there to be more options for getting around, selfishly for me and for the whole community. So that's kind of what brought me. And then I'm just to keep this simple. I'll just call your name and just share your name, maybe where you're calling in from, and briefly what piqued your interest about transportation. So we'll start with Natalia.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm calling in from MVCC, so Metro Valley Citizens Council building in TWISP, and I also deal with the transportation thing since I've been living in Mazama for the last few weeks only. I'm from the west side of the mountains. And also my name is Natalia, and I think the thing about transportation that's always been super interesting to me is the kind of escape that you're able to have when you have your own vehicle, and also how we can combine that with other people who also want to have that escape or need to go somewhere, but the independence that comes from that, I find really interesting.
Great. Thanks, Natalia. Let's go to Betsy next.
I'm Betsy Weiss. I know a lot of you, except for those people I don't. So I've been active with Meadow at Home from the beginning. Transportation is a key issue for Meadow at Home. We moved to the Valley in 2012 and have had one car for 2 adults in that time. I'm very aware of the fact that not having a regular job makes that possible in this valley, how hard it is to rely solely on your own power or ride shares. And I'm very aware of how compromise is important. Compromising one's limitless, footloose life. If you're trying to limit your carbon use. So anyway, I think it's a really interesting discussion. I think sharing more is key to helping us work better, and trusting one another as we do that, I think is pretty important.
Thank you, Betsy. Let's go to Emily next.
Hello, I'm Emily. I am calling in from Mazama. Yeah, I'm like I kind of mentioned, I'm working with the city planner in Winthrop for this practicum over the summer. So I, similar to Natalia, have not experienced the, car-centric dependence as much as many of you likely have. I think transportation's really interesting, mostly because there's so many options. I mean, you can bike, you can walk, you can take a horse. So there's a lot of options in the area. It does seem like there is a specific focus right now to kind of move away from car-centric infrastructure, and hopefully we can get more options for transit, transportation, and supporting those other methods kind of rolling.
Thanks, Emily. Let's go to Catherine next.
Yes, I'm Catherine Niemitz, and I have been in and out of the Meadow Valley since the 1950s. And this in and out is what my concern is. There have been various ways to share a ride to Seattle or SeaTac over the years. This year, I could not even share a ride online. I was wondering, is there any way to get in contact with anybody who is driving to Seattle? Because I obviously can't drive there if I'm flying out. And I had 4 of my children here this summer, and trying to find a ride for them in and out is a major problem. I would like to see something more than the Wenatchee shuttle. So some way to get in contact with people, preferably online, to arrange a ride share. And I'm certainly willing to pay for the gas. Does anybody have any suggestions how I get in touch with that?
We will definitely, that is a great point. And we definitely, I know there have been different solutions in the past, and I'm going to share some ideas of, where we might go in the future with that. But I think you've identified a need that and challenge that a lot of us face. So you're not alone. Yeah, get our creative juices flowing on that. Let's go to Carolyn next.
I'm Carolyn. We are a 1-car household. I live in Winthrop. And one of the reasons why we live I live in North Village. And one of the reasons is that you can walk into town, you can bike to places, I can get on the bus to get my hair cut tomorrow, all of those good things. Also, by the way, Catherine, on the NetOnNet bulletin board, sometimes people will post about hoping for a ride and so forth. And then Dana's going to talk more about that as well. But I'm on the rideshare committee with Dana. I've always wanted to be involved with climate change in some way, which I have been in work and now not working anymore. So that's why I'm here. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Carolyn. Let's go to Janet next. Maybe some internet issues. Let's go to Peter and we'll see if we get Janet back.
Well, unlike the more virtuous among you, we own 2 cars, and you know, we noticed that when you live rural, you get in the car a lot. Both our sons have ended up in New York City, and they remarked how they can walk to everything. So there's this kind of irony of living in a place where you're surrounded by nature. In some ways, you're contributing to its gradual destruction. And I mean, it's the impact of owning 2 cars is more even than just the driving. It's, you know, we're building a 2-car garage. We have all that infrastructure and metal sitting around unused, 90-some% of the time. So, if I chose to feel guilty about it, there's a lot to feel guilty. I don't, but I wish there were some better options. At least for the routine transportation. I do live almost 2 miles from town, and sometimes I walk in, and I do get a little sort of virtue buzz when I do that. But, I'm not going to do a 4-mile walk every time I want to get something in town. I'm currently not biking, but I'll get back to that in a few months.
Well, thanks, Peter. Let's go to Gwen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gwen Vernon. I am in Winthrop and Seattle. I have to say, I was thinking that maybe I just didn't read this one. I was thinking we were going to be talking about bus and kind of general transportation in the Valley, and less about, I mean, that's riding and that's sharing a ride with a big bus, but maybe not sharing a ride with each other. So I think I'm more interested in hearing kind of maybe what some of the options have already been. I do know there is one person in Twist who has a very extensive email list beyond the bulletin board, who tries to find rides kind of more on a, hey, do you know this person? Maybe you'd be comfortable taking carpooling with this person because they are a friend of a friend. So kind of making it a little bit more personal. But I'm not here for any particular reason, except maybe hear about busing, but it sounds like that's not going to be the case. We'll just listen.
Thanks, Gwen. And we are going to talk a little bit about Trango. So we'll talk about kind of the climate action plan a little bit. There's a number of strategies and approaches around transportation. And so we'll talk a little bit about electric vehicles, a little bit about buses, a little bit about potential ride shares. So you'll get a little bit of everything. And yeah, I'm sure we'll figure out where we need to do further research and problem solving after this. There's a lot to learn. Let's go to Matthew.
Hello, everyone. Matthew Riggin, and I'm over in Darrington, so on the wet side of the mountains. And I'm just dropping in because the Metro has so much groovy stuff going on, and so I was just looking for ideas. I live in town in Darrington. Those of you don't know, it's 1,400 people, really basic services. So it's great in town, hardware, grocery, that basic stuff. I walk, I bicycle, but going anywhere else is tough. The Transit Authority, whose name just flew out of my head, has been cutting back service over the years since I've lived here over the last 25 years. And there's basically 2 buses in the morning and 2 in the evening. So not really practical, I think, for most people. The Soxhawtla tribe has kind of stepped in, and they have started a little shuttle route between Concrete and Darrington and going by the reservation. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, so I'm just looking for other ideas, right? Rideshare, bulletin board, I don't know. Think outside the box on how to help people move around without expending so much carbon and being so isolated in our little metal boxes. Thanks.
Well put, Matthew. Yeah, Peter, did you want to?
I just had a comment that I was placed by an agency working in Darrington for a few weeks, and they wanted to put me up in Arlington and have me drive 45 minutes each way. And so when I found an Airbnb in Darrington that would be bicycle to work, they agreed that if I cut my salary $5 an hour, that they would spring for the lodging in Darrington rather than putting me up at a motel in Arlington.
Nice. All right. Well, maybe next time you'll stay with Matthew. All right, let's go to George.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I had to take a phone call, so I missed, Dana, I missed the instructions.
Oh, yeah. Just briefly, your name and what you're interested in connected to transportation.
Okay, George Schneider's my name. I live in Twist with my wife, Boo. And I guess we got into the electric vehicle world a couple of years ago, bought a Chevy Bolt, and we're now, trying to maximize its use and minimize the use of driving our other car, which is a four-wheel drive car that we still have to drive in the winter because the Bolt doesn't really cut it on certain days. But we're trying hard to maximize the use of the electric car. And, so it's been really enlightening and challenging at times to try to, and kind of in early days of electric vehicle infrastructure, to make that work on trips to see our kids, who are in other states and things like that. But so we're interested in, sharing that experience, trying to do our part to hasten the acceptance of EVs, in the community. I think there's probably some things that the community at large could do. I know somebody said something about Winthrop is, looking at that specifically, which is great. I just like sharing rides. I'm a kind of an inveterate hitchhiker, back from my teenage days. You might still see me hitchhiking around here. So I just have a problem with people sitting alone in their cars.
Awesome. Thanks, George. Yeah, we're definitely going to get more into EVs a little bit. Yeah, Emily knows a lot about EVs, so she might be able to help you squeeze out some extra, figure out your trip planning. But we'll definitely talk more about EVs. There's some exciting stuff happening in the Valley. Looks like Gudrun.
Gudrun.
Gudrun,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah. Hello. Okay, I live in Twisp, and we do have an electric car. We bought one in January 1920, before it became weird, when you could still go somewhere and take examine cars that you wanted to buy. So we have a Prius, and we're very happy with it. Rob gets very good mileage. He's an excellent driver. I used a bus service that comes from. Let's see where it comes from. The Okanagan. I mean, John. They have the senior bus. That I ride that to the gym. And I got a taste for what it was like when they didn't have a driver. I tried to take Trango, but it meant kind of an 18-minute walk from where I live to Blue Star, and then getting off at a very busy intersection, which is a little hard. I'm visually impaired, so it's not, it's kind of a wide open kind of intersection, and with traffic and so forth. So it wasn't. I didn't have to even think about that for very long because they got the driver back again. But anyway, so I know that the Trango bus can stop and pick you up if you're going home. They can put you off practically wherever you want to. But as far as picking up, they can drop you more. How should I say? More more per your needs, where you want to be dropped. But as far as picking you up, if you're not at the right place, you're not going to be picked up there. So taking the Trango bus meant basically probably an hour to get to the gym. When I go with John, I can go to the gym, do my workout, my 20-minute workout, go home, and I'm home. It takes an hour. So that's efficient time use, and it works great. So that's my experience.
Cool. Thank you. It sounds like you have some firsthand experience with the senior bus and Trango, which are both things that we've been kind of learning more about and looking into. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then we'll go to Ellen.
Hi, so Ellen Lammerman, and I partially wanted to listen in so that I would be inspired to try the bus, to simply get from Winthrop to Twist and back with whatever I went to Twist to do, which might be groceries or picking up things. So it's hard for me to motivate myself when I'm going to be carrying things, and I might want to stop and visit with people and get the schedule. So I'm trying to get myself to try it and see if I can't do it more often. I think getting around in the Metro, I don't know how it can be easier, and I'd love to hear ideas. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, that is a great spot to leave us off. We'll see if we can get you pumped up for a Trango ride by the end of this. Maybe we could all go do a field trip or something. Okay, well, with that, I am going to share my screen. Here we go, and we will go to presentation. Okay, so here we are going to talk about transportation solutions, kind of focused on driven by the Climate Action Plan, and then also Metro at Home, looking at kind of this theme of preparedness. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. The kind of initiative that I'm working on, Resilient Metro, comes out of the Metro Valley Climate Action Plan. And resilient can mean a lot of things, including a lot of the things that you all talked about how we get around, how we kind of take care of each other. I heard trust and sharing and compromise. So all of that in terms of how we get around and respond to climate change is super important. So the Metro Valley Climate Action Plan, some of you were, I know, very involved in creating it. It was initiated in 2019, really as a result of thinking about the wildfires and how do we respond to fires, be more prepared. There were over 60 people involved in the task force that wrote the plan. And then I believe about 500 community members participated in workshops, in providing comments about what should be in this climate action plan. And it was also really driven by science of what climate change is and what we need to prepare for. So starting with a little bit of background information before we get into transportation. Climate action means both, this is kind of a little 101, many of you probably know this, but it means both mitigation, which is addressing the root cause by reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So burning less fossil fuels, reducing the emissions that we put into the atmosphere. And then it also means adaptation or resilience. So better preparing and taking care of each other for the climate impacts. There's a lot of work happening in both of these areas. If you're curious about other parts of the climate action plan, happy to talk to you about that. Let's go to the next. There we go. So we're focusing mostly today on mitigation, which is kind of working towards a carbon neutral Methow Valley, where we're reducing our use of fossil fuel and emissions. And this includes transportation, which we're going to focus on. And it also includes some other solutions, reducing our waste and consumption, thinking about how we build our buildings and retrofitting old buildings and making new buildings really efficient. And then also there's a bunch of solutions connected to agriculture, natural systems, and landscapes. So those are kind of some of the areas that we can reduce our emissions. Okay, so we have a little multiple choice question here. So as this climate action plan was being created, there was an emission study that was done to say, okay, if we want to reduce our contribution to this problem, where are our emissions in the valley coming from? So go ahead, and if you want to just put into the chat what you think. Let's see if I can see the chat here. Which one you think is the biggest source of emissions? There we can see. All right, we have B. Okay, you guys, maybe a little bit too obvious given the topic of the presentation. You guys are onto something. Okay, let me get back to presentation. There we go. So yes, transportation is the biggest source of emissions in our valley by a lot. So 92% of our emissions come from transportation. Yeah, there's some other emissions, but transportation is, I was super surprised when I saw this, a huge source of our emissions. So a really good place to focus on if we want to reduce our emissions. This is a more detailed breakdown of where those come from. We can come back to this if people have questions. I think one thing to note is this big blue section, light vehicles, that's like people's personal vehicles. So tourist vehicles and trucks, seasonal residents, those all are part of it, but light vehicles are the cars that we drive ourselves. So in response to kind of this information, these are the strategies that are in our community climate action plan to reduce these emissions. One is accelerate the shift to electric vehicles, which some of you talked about. We have some EV owners in this group, it sounds like. Two is expand the reach and effectiveness of Trango, which is the public transportation we have in the valley. Three is explore creating rideshare and carpooling programs and options, potentially a rideshare app. And then four is improve infrastructure for active transportation. So develop a plan, seek more funding for safe biking and walking trails. Going to touch on that briefly, but not as much. And I guess I'll just say one more thing about this. There's been a committee of people that Carolyn has been a part of. Missy LeDuc has also been a part of it. Susan Taylor, who's in Mazama, my mom, Christy Scanterup. And really our conversations have been around brainstorming and trying to learn ourselves what could be possible in terms of these strategies. We've really focused on rideshare. We've also done some research into what's happening with Trango. And then there's been some really exciting work on electric vehicles, but just that disclaimer, I'm not an expert in any of this. This has been kind of a group of community members brainstorming and researching some options. So the goal for today is to share some of what we've learned and then really to hear from you and expand the group of people that are talking and thinking about this and hear from you what you think might be some good solutions or what we haven't thought of. So first, just zooming out, a lot of you touched on this kind of a culture shift in terms of changing how we get around and changing the options that are available and also our behavior of what choices we make. So this is Seattle traffic, but just that idea that of each of us moving around in our own cars, and especially in the valley, that being kind of one of the few options for getting around. So we're going to do a slight historical detour because I think this is kind of interesting. During World War II, there was a set of carpool propaganda that was all about trying to get people to carpool to reduce fuel use and also to save tires for the military effort. So I think just seeing this historical example of these posters that were really encouraging people to share cars and thinking about like, oh, what if that was the thing we were all trying to do together? I love some of the help win the war, squeeze in one more, join a car saver club. And then this one is a whole nother tactic. When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler, join a car sharing club today. So there's kind of inspirational and shaming happening here, some different approaches. And then some of you touched on this one. Here's the new way to new friendships. Thinking about, building community and kind of that health and resilience of having relationships to get to know people, especially in a place where people live kind of spread out. So kind of a fun detour, but also somewhat inspiring to me to see a different time when we were focused on carpooling and riding together in a different way. And maybe some of you were alive when that was happening. I was not. So for me, it's cool to look back on. Okay, so I'm going to go through actually, let me just pause for a second. Does anybody have any questions so far about the climate action plan before I go into some of these transportation strategies and updates? Okay, cool. We'll have more time for discussion at the end. Just wanted to pause for a moment because I know I went through a lot of information. Okay, so we're going to talk about each of those 4 strategies and some updates in terms of what's happening with those strategies. So the first one is expand the reach and effectiveness of Trango. Over on the left here is a map of where Trango goes. There's also on the website, they have a schedule. It comes on the hour. So just for me, like I've ridden Trango once. I live in Mazama, it doesn't come up here. But we do have public transportation and Gudrun, is that your name? how you say it? Okay, great. Like Gudrun said, talked about, there are some definite barriers to using Trango and opportunities for making it more usable and more effective. So we've looked at, talking to people at Trango about kind of what they're working on. Seems like there's opportunity to just get the word out about existing schedules and routes. This committee that has been working on this issue has done some contacting of Valley organizations to see, like the library, could you think about the Trango schedule when you're planning an event, or how can we like really schedule things around Trango and also publish the Trango schedule with other things that are happening. Another thing that just happened, which it's now, I know that Tracy sent out an announcement about this, but the Okanagan Council of Governments was doing an update to their transit plan and had a survey that went out to ask people about kind of this feedback of how could the public transit that we have better serve you. I think there's a lot more opportunity to work with and do outreach to Trango about some of those barriers and about things that would make it more effective. And then there's also just thinking about exactly like Ellen talked about, trying it out if you haven't, thinking about if we want public transportation, let's try and use what we have and start to kind of change that mindset around just jumping in our car and using the public transportation that we have. So that's the first. I guess I'll just pause here. Does anybody else have anything they want to share about experience with Trango or things that you've noticed would, and I do not work for Trango, I will say, but any thoughts about Trango before we move on to the next?
I do have a question. This is Ellen.
Yeah.
I know it goes by pretty near my house.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've seen people there. So,
yeah.
And it's not a stop, but you can flag it down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is where maybe some more clarity on where the stops are would be helpful. I do know, I think like what
my question is really,
sorry,
I know where the stops are.
Yeah.
But I thought way back in the beginning, they said if it's going by an area, you can flag it down. Is that no more true?
I can answer that.
Yeah, go for it.
They are willing to stop, and your area is a place they can stop because they can pull off the main road.
Right.
To let you on. So as long as you were there, and it's pretty reliable in coming by when you'd expect it to come by with their schedule. So if you are out there, they will come by and you can flag them down. It's
Great.
Also very easy for them to let you off where you want. In some ways it feels more, you can feel more confident about the fact that you can get let off where you want to be let off than getting on where you're kind of hoping they're coming by when they say they're coming by. And yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely opportunity for more clarity on kind of how that works, beyond word of mouth so that people know what their options are. And I think that's a great example of it.
Does anyone know where the stops are in Winthrop exactly? Because TWISP has them more marked.
You're right. They don't, the stops in Winthrop are at the Red Barn, at Thriftway, and at
there's Second Avenue.
Castle and what's its name?
There's Canyon Street.
Canyon Street, Lufkin Road.
Yeah. I wonder.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Gwen.
Oh no, I didn't mean to interrupt whoever was still talking.
Nope, I think it's you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just looking at the schedule as we were talking here, and what I've heard from people is that, at least in the Winthrop area, that there are some key places that it doesn't stop. And so could those be added on to, could Trango add that onto their schedule? For example, the library. Well, now it's a new library, so of course it didn't have it there before, but, and the school. And that maybe maybe people don't know where it stops because it just flies by, and it's not super well marked in a couple of places in Winthrop.
For sure. Yeah, I think, Carolyn, wasn't there an update that they are going to stop at the new library? I want to say somebody got
Yes,
that
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's already drawn on one of their apps.
Yep. So that's another thing to know. They do have an app, which I downloaded, and you can see if your bus is on time. So another thing, if you want to check that out. So yeah, Trango, I think there's a lot of opportunity, one, to increase awareness around it, figure out what some of those barriers are, participate when these surveys go out and really get the word out, so that when they are asking for input, we make sure as many people hear about those opportunities as possible. Cool. So I'm going to move on. This is one of the strategies. Another one is to accelerate the shift to electric vehicles. So this includes building out fast charging infrastructure and capacity, which, just to clarify, is specifically for getting in and out of the valley. Mostly if you live in the valley, you would likely be charging at home. But for kind of those questions about getting to Seattle or Wenatchee, this infrastructure is super important. Working with OCEC, the electric co-op, and the PUD to prepare for the electric vehicle transition. So those are kind of some ongoing conversations of what that looks like. Education and marketing, and then advocate for developing programs to make EVs more accessible or low emission vehicles for people that don't have the financial ability to buy a brand new one. So these are the strategies in the climate action plan. And then I just wanted to share a little bit of information about electric vehicles. Emily has put together an awesome FAQ about electric vehicles that is going to be part of that education and just helping to answer people's questions. But just a couple things as you're thinking about transportation. In Washington, the state energy strategy has a target date to end the sale of combustion engine cars, so cars that are not electric, by 2035. They are becoming increasingly more affordable. There's a lot more options. The cost of ownership is lower, so less maintenance, and the cost of electricity is lower than gas. And then there's definitely a range in how far they can travel. And Emily's put together some great information on kind of how to figure out what your needs might be. There's a future of bidirectional charging, which is basically being able to charge your car and then charge in the other direction. So there's a resiliency piece there for when power goes out. And I guess something to consider around this is just thinking about, when your next vehicle, when you think about buying your next vehicle, to think about if an EV makes sense for you. So this is more of a personal solution, but there is actually, the school district is looking at, there's some grant opportunities for electric school buses. So it can also be a collective solution of switching our collective transportation to electric.
I'm just curious, like,
yeah,
at the charging stations, let's say at Twistworks or something like that, who are you paying for the power when you hook your car up there, or how does that work?
Emily, do you want to take that one?
So yeah, it kind of depends. If you are at your home, then yeah, you're paying for that electricity to your car to charge your vehicle. If you're at a charging station, it's a bit different. It really does depend on the station itself. Some privately owned stations will provide you an electric charge for free. So TwistWorks has an EV charging station that you can charge at for free. If you are at East 20 Pizza in Winthrop, it's about 90 cents per kilowatt hour to charge, which is a bit pricey, but if you go in and buy a pizza, they will knock off that service fee pretty significantly. So there's that. And then there are a couple other of stations in the area that do allow you to charge for free. Most of which, however, are for hotels. So if you're staying at, I'm slipping the name of the hotel, but if you're staying at one of the hotels in Winthrop, there is a charging station available that you have free access to if you're staying there. So kind of trying to expand that availability so that, there are more chargers available for free is kind of key.
Yeah. Thank you, Emily. That was awesome. And yeah, to Carolyn's point, we can, Emily, they want your contact information. So we can definitely connect you. And then we're also going to definitely be putting out Emily's kind of educational materials, on electric vehicles. So those will be available as well. And it's definitely, I think, just recognizing that it's a big learning curve for everybody of learning, what are the options, how much does it cost, all of that. So increasing our awareness is definitely part of it. So specifically in the Metau, about 90% of charging is done at home. So kind of to that point of, you're paying your normal electric rates if you charge at home. These charging stations are really for when you're trying to go a longer distance. And this is really exciting news. A group of people that were involved in creating the climate action plan have been working for about a year and a half to put together a grant application to the Department of Transportation. And there hasn't been a news release about it yet, but it is public information. And they were recently awarded a grant to install level 3, which is the fastest charging station in Pateros near the bakery, at TwistWorks, and then in New Halem, which will be at Seattle City Light. And then a second part of the grant is upgrading some of the chargers that are on Route 2, as well as the chargers in Wenatchee. So really the goal of this is to connect the Cascade Loop so that you could go in either direction on the Cascade Loop and be able to charge your car getting in and out of the valley. And I know for a lot of people that live here or come here frequently, thinking about, can I get back and forth with an electric car is a big question and a big barrier. So this is, recent news and really exciting for expanding our ability to move towards electric transportation. What are the issues for electric cars in the winter? Emily, do you want to take that one, or I can also say what I know?
Yeah, you can go ahead and say your piece on that.
Okay.
From my basic understanding, the main issues are with battery powering and kind of as I think someone mentioned with their Chevy Bolt, it not having that all-wheel drive. I think those are the main things, but yeah, go ahead and add what you
for sure. Yeah, so there, same thing. There are four-wheel drive electric vehicles and not four-wheel drive. So just like a normal car, that would be something to think about. And then the battery life is a little bit less in the winter because you're having to heat your car. I know that this is personal experience, but my family got an electric vehicle that in the winter, they were able to charge one time in Leavenworth and get back to Seattle, my parents. So there's just a bit of a learning curve of how far you can go. And things like blasting the air conditioning or blasting the heat would impact how far you can go. But having these stations along the way and, you know, stopping for the level 3 stations go super fast. So having that ability to stop really, really changes that equation. Okay, these are good questions. Anything else on electric vehicles before we move on?
Yeah, just one comment.
Yeah.
This is all really great to hear, especially the ones that are not in the valley. For those of us that live in the valley, it's not gonna,
Yeah.
but it will encourage visitors, you know, to come with their electric cars. One thing that I've experienced is that getting your electric car worked on by local mechanics or body shop people is almost impossible. There's special training that's needed. So one idea might be to have a grant where some of the local folks could get the training, so we wouldn't have to go to Seattle or Wenatchee for you know, literally a fender bender. You know, all the body shops in town. So I can't touch that, you know, because I'm afraid I'll short something out or.
Totally.
You know, and it's so some training assistance might be a good idea.
Totally. Thanks, George. I think that that's a great point. And I think that TwistWorks is looking into kind of developing some of that ability to be able to, train people and create a facility where specifically for repairing the charging stations. But I think that's another great point of thinking about, the people that work on cars here, could there be training for them so that they can keep kind of doing their work and you have the ability to get repairs done here. Cool. I'm going to keep us moving a little bit. So the next strategy in the climate action plan is improve infrastructure for active transportation. The committee that I've been part of hasn't been working a ton on this, but I just wanted to highlight Emily's working on complete streets in Winthrop, thinking about some of these planning issues. Metro Trails is working on a twin trail between Winthrop and Twisp so that you could kind of commute on bike or ski in between Winthrop and Twisp. So I think there's definitely a lot more opportunity for improving infrastructure for active transportation and biking. Not going to dwell here a ton. Actually, and Peter, your wife, you mentioned to me that your wife is working on getting bikes into schools. So that's another awesome connection. We'll have to explore more. So the last one, and this is where I want to spend a little more time, is this strategy: explore creating rideshare and carpooling programs and options. So I just wanted to say a little bit about what we've discussed as some of the needs. One, on the left, are within the valley transportation that does not align with the current Trango offering. So recognizing we want to improve Trango options, figure out how to use that more. So a couple of the needs are daily commuting up and down the valley. So people that are going every day to the same place, getting to special events like the farmers market, concerts, the art fest that just happened, movies at Barnyard, you know, those times when there might be a lot of people going to one place. And then we've also talked about kids transportation, sports, getting to the new Winthrop Library, so kind of some challenges around that. And then just like Catherine talked about, getting in and out of the Metro Valley. So people in the valley without a car who are unable to drive. So getting to doctor's appointments, errands. Currently, Meadow at Home has an awesome program to get volunteers to drive people and help them get these rides. And then there's trips to and from Seattle, Wenatchee, other places. There's a lot of reasons: travel, second homeowners, getting to the airport, shopping trips. Figuring out those rides. So I want to just pause for a second. Does anybody have any additions to needs for either within the valley or getting in and out of the valley that feel like they aren't covered here, just as we're starting to think about solutions?
Well, I think also, people love to get up to the mountains and, doing that together more, or.
So kind of the recreation, like getting up to Washington Pass or something like that.
Mhm.
Okay, great. That's a great one to add. Cool. So next I'm going to give you
I
a
had
rapid.
one
Oh,
as
sorry. Go
well.
ahead. Yeah.
Oh, all good. I was also thinking that, oh God, please tell me I didn't just lose it. That one of the things that people don't talk about as much is, we're talking a little bit about like grocery shopping and stuff, and then carrying all that on and off a bus or in the car and all that. If you can't get right from the grocery store into the bus, and how many bags you might be carrying if you would otherwise put it in your trunk, that would also be something to think about.
For sure. Yeah, totally. Okay, so I'm going to start to share some ideas and research that we've looked into for possible solutions. I'm just going to go through these somewhat quickly, and then I want to hear what you think of some of these ideas and maybe some of the ideas you might have. So the first one is a rideshare app for the Methow Valley. Missy LeDuc talked to someone who did the Methow Trails app and asked about what does it take to create an app. The cost for a custom app is around $10,000 with some additional cost to maintain. And this is something that would be a great candidate for a grant application. And you could have the ability to either offer or request rides. So you could say, I'm going to Seattle, or I'm going to Twist, or you could request a ride. The downsides, there's kind of less accessibility for people that don't have smartphones or can't use them. And it's also only as good as people actually using the app. So it requires some kind of getting used to, and there's a lot of apps out there that don't get used. So thinking about it could be a great solution, but it would require some really good kind of momentum and marketing to get people to use it. And it's also a bit of a higher cost project to get it started. But it's definitely an option. There's Carolyn did some great research into some places, one on San Juan Island, one on Orcas Island, that just have physical rideshare stops. So it turns out, I did not know this, thank you, Carolyn, for the research, that hitchhiking actually is legal. And so figuring out a place where it's kind of a little more official, a little more kind of known, that so we've talked about what if there was at multiple places in the valley, especially places that Trango doesn't serve, these physical rideshare stops. The Mazama store and Missy are looking into just trying to pilot this at the Mazama store. They have PCT hikers that are looking for rides up to Hart's Pass. And then, a lot of people are looking for rides either down valley or back to Seattle. So thinking about piloting this at the Mazama store. So this is another option. I think somebody mentioned the bulletin board has been used in the past for rides. I went to look on there, and there definitely are still some people posting on there. It gets kind of buried with all the other stuff that's on the bulletin board, the free chickens and that kind of stuff. So one option would be to think about like working with MetoNet. Could there be a separate page just for rides, or, you know, how to improve using the bulletin board specifically for looking for rides. And then another idea is this kind of peer-to-peer rideshare or email or texting neighborhood groups. Gwen mentioned, and we actually talked to Mac Shelton in TWISP, who has an amazing email list. He emails out to friends and family and acquaintances of people looking for rides. I've also started posting on Instagram when I'm looking for a ride. So kind of this more, less of an official thing, but helping people to organize, you know, neighborhood or community email or texting groups. One thought is it could kind of be like the Firewise groups. So if you're already in a neighborhood, using that to either offer or request rides. And it could be a short distance ride or a long distance ride. It could be something of like, hey, like I'm going to the barnyard tonight. Does anybody want to come with me? And a more of a community building thing as well, or also looking for those longer rides. Susan, who's in this group, found a website called carpool.com that has a free tool where you can basically just, this is a picture of a test one she did, but you can post like, I'm going to Winthrop at this time, and people could sign up for the number of spots in your car. So that could be a tool that that we start to use in more of these informal groups. I guess I'll say one benefit to this is just kind of that, who was it that I think Betsy talked about, like that trust piece, that if it's just random on the bulletin board, maybe you're less likely to actually respond, where if it's your neighborhood or someone you have some connection to, maybe it's more likely to kind of get out of that routine of just driving solo and actually start to give people rides and request rides. And then we want to talk a little bit about what we know about the Meto at Home rides, and I'd like to just invite Carolyn to share more about this. But yeah, just the demand for rides to doctor's appointments, eye appointments, thinking about how we can work to combine some of those rides and also make sure that people in our community that need rides get the rides that they have, and we don't kind of burn out volunteers driving back and forth. And then also thinking about the opportunity for community building of if there was shared rides to doctor's appointments or to errands for people that can't drive. Maybe that would be another opportunity for getting to know each other. A couple possible solutions are using and improving the public transportation options. So that survey I talked about, there's a nutrition services bus and van, and thinking about how to better utilize that. And then also potentially changing scheduling. And Carolyn, I want to just pass it to you briefly to share about kind of what you've thought about and worked on with that.
As a volunteer for Meto at Home, it's pretty clear if you're on that list that getting rides or getting drivers to take folks to Wenatchee is probably the challenging request that there is. And my neighbor just happened to say that he was in his impression that a lot of these appointments are for eye appointments when people, I guess, cannot drive themselves back. Anyway, so I contacted the main place in Wenatchee and talked with scheduler. And so they're in the process of considering whether they could consolidate appointments for Methow Valley folks on certain days and such like that. And we'll see how that can result, but they are considering it, and it was a very positive early response about that. So we're hopeful, and there's all sorts of little ideas that any of us might have for things like this. And All you have to do is ask and see what happens.
Yeah. Thanks, Karen. I think that's such a creative solution and awesome that yeah, they're considering it. Cool. And then I'll just share in this kind of rideshare committee group that we've talked about, this potential of, I want to hear some more ideas, but potential of a campaign just to educate people about what we called a suite of options. So kind of building on Metal Recycles, their awesome motto of "it's what we do here" ethic, and thinking about that in terms of transportation and giving each other rides and reducing our emissions. Thinking about the double win of reducing emissions and building community. It could include upping, publicizing Trango, encouraging ride sharing to events, the resilience piece of supporting people who can't drive, and thinking about like, who are your neighbors that maybe can't get to the event you're going, and like getting over that barrier of reaching out and offering a ride. Susan Ernsdorf had the idea of just sharing in the Metro Valley news or the radio stories of ride sharing and hitchhiking. She had some really fun stories of like making friends getting a ride. Some of the awesome education on EVs that Emily's working on, that her FAQ is in the works. And then, yeah, thinking about biking, walking, skiing as a mode of transportation as well. So as we start to think about solutions, maybe there's multiple solutions that kind of go together, and just encouraging people to think about what their options might be. So that is all I have for information. I want to shift to questions and kind of brainstorming. And Betsy has a great question to start us off, of what people identify as barriers to ride sharing. Have there been any focus groups looking at this? That's a great question. I think this kind of is the first focus group, at least in our Metau community. I think we could look into more about if there's other examples in other communities. Does anybody have thoughts of like what would be some of the barriers for you? I'm gonna stop sharing. Yeah.
Well, I know that, I think it was like back in 2000, early 2000s, I was living in Mazama and worked on ride sharing with Missy and everybody. Yeah. At least back then, there was just a liability issue that we kept running into, that as the organizers of it put us into a little place of potentially having some liability if something kind of went south. And so, yeah, that's a barrier that I ran into in the past because of our special litigious style country with no universal health care. So
for sure. Yeah, I think that's definitely a barrier, and something to keep looking into. There's someone who was on this committee, Susan, who's just retiring from being a lawyer. And she did a little bit of research into it, and learned that as long as there's no payment for the ride, that really kind of reduces the liability or responsibility. So that's one piece. And yeah, so that was one thing we learned, but I think definitely for whichever route we go, that's something to continue to make sure that, safety and liability is considered. Yeah, Peter.
So I hitchhiked about 20,000 miles, mostly in Pennsylvania, but across the country as well, back when I was young and a young adult. So I decided when I had a car, that it was time to pay it back. But this was now 10 years later. Instead of being in the early 70s, it was the early 80s. And basically the first few people I picked up completely creeped me out. I mean, they were high or on drugs, or I thought that I was going to get knifed before I managed to figure out how to get them out of the car. And so, the trust issue is big. I think I've picked up one hitchhiker in the last 25 years, because of that. So, I resonate much more with, well, in the Valley, if we had those signs, like they did in Orcas Island or San Juan's, and especially during ski season, skiers, that kind of thing, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with that. But, probably picking up random hitchhikers is going to be a rare event for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
Was
sure.
that
And
in the
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Was that in the Methow that you had that experience?
Oh, no.
No, okay. So I think you might be different here. I mean,
Yeah,
I think
you're right.
I think people don't seem to be as knife wielding in this valley.
I just wanted to share, I have a couple other questions. So as you're thinking about barriers, also thinking about like which ideas and solutions, like Peter talked about, would resonate with you, which would you personally use, or what other ideas do you have around this topic of transportation? So just to put those out to kind of fuel your thinking as well. Gwen put in the chat, having to coordinate. Some people don't want to deal with it. Lack of convenience. Definitely COVID has been a recent barrier. Just wanting to get there and not have to talk to someone. Totally can resonate with all of those. I think one thing I've thought about in terms of thinking about the different like needs and opportunities is that I personally am more willing to be inconvenienced if it's a longer ride. So if it is getting a ride to, Seattle or Wenatchee or further away, there's like a little more planning that goes into that. Maybe a little bit less planning that goes into driving somewhere within the Valley. So that's one potential thing to think about of like, when are you willing to be inconvenienced. We've also talked with Missy about some fun ways to think about incentivizing it or trying it out, or just getting people to, go get a free treat at the Museum store, something around that. So thinking about making it fun, and definitely, thinking about that equation of barriers and convenience is really smart, because we don't change our behavior if there's a ton of barriers in the way. Carolyn.
One thing that I've been wanting to, or maybe everybody here could reach out, is to different organizations. For example, Met Out Home has events, and the carpooling options are always there.
Mm-hmm.
The barn at such a time. And that's true for some organizations, but some are, for whatever reason, more concerned about the liability.
Mm-hmm.
Example, a native plant walk, I was told, we can't offer and talk about carpooling at all because of liability. The Mountaineers website, though, if you look at it, they are upfront that we can't sponsor it, but we support it. And they always apparently also include that information. And think how many organizations there are here, and how many opportunities there would be for carpooling instead of all parking at the community center in Twisp or the barn and going there before going somewhere else. You could coordinate with people, it seems to me, pretty easily here, especially if you were in a group.
Mm-hmm.
Like those, you'd have a lot of trust already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting to have a kind of a community challenge. I know there's been, Ashland is one of those communities that's really done some unique sort of like community challenges. Cause I know even for myself, I have all these intentions to ride my bike. And then every day I'm like, oh, I forgot again. There's just something about being in a little routine that you have, and in order to sort of break some of those habits and really, I would love to probably ride my bike into work and home, but I just haven't shifted my habitual thinking. But yeah, the incentivizing and then also changing behavior, having some kind of accountability, or like a buddy, that's doing it with you, that sort of thing. So I don't know if Resilient Met How has it in to like, hey, can we lower our emissions and have people sign up for different aspects of it?
For sure.
Something like that.
Yeah, and I think there's that balance of personal responsibility and choice, and then also like what our environment is and infrastructure. So I think those are both important, of like what's available to us in terms of Trango, in terms of charging stations, in terms of bike lanes, and then also the behavior change, and like thinking about those together. So it's both our responsibility and looking for how we advocate for kind of having better choices. Yeah, Catherine.
I have a concrete example. I'm going to leave now because I'm going up to the Meadow Conservancy's tour of the grain and mill farm up the Twist River Road. And they say on their website, please try to carpool, but they don't give any information about who you could carpool with. So I think maybe if there were you could, suggest or ask for or offer a possibility on the site that's advertising the event.
For sure.
Okay, well, I'll see you. I gotta go.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Have fun.
Betsy had something.
Yeah, Betsy, go ahead.
I love the idea of having some sites set up as carpool benches. You'd have to obviously choose your places and have a safe place to pull off and to stop. But as somebody, when I ride the bus and I go to a meeting at 11 in Twisp and I'd want to get home to Winthrop, there's no bus at 12. And so you have to wait, you kill an hour. And it all adds to this huge amount of time that it ends up taking when you travel by bus, and it feels weighty. If there were a place where, and I've thought about hitchhiking, and I don't know, being an old lady hitchhiking at this point or even knocking on the window of people I know, it feels awkward. It feels like my choice rather than their choice. And I love the idea of if I went by one of those benches, I would definitely pick people up. And even if we started with just a very few locations on places that have a lot of traffic, I bet they'd be used. I bet they would be welcomed.
I would second that. I think that's out of everything, that's the one that's resonated with me the most yeah. Personally.
Cool.
Can I
have this vision of having
really quick?
I'll just finish.
I just wanted to.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to say that Gwen's dropped some things in the chat that I thought were really interesting. If you wanted to talk about those at some point too.
I just imagined two different benches strategically at Hank's parking lot. One saying to Winthrop, Rideshare, and the other one to Carlton, Rideshare. You'd have corresponding places, obviously in Carlton and Winthrop. Apparently Mazama, which is the rapid transportation options.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. So we've got some good votes for the benches or the physical locations.
Yeah, this was an interesting one, to have volunteer Met How, maybe using that for the carpool to events.
Yeah, and so Natalia, you said, yeah, when I was thinking of that, I mean, people go to the volunteer Meta to sign up to volunteer. So that's not necessarily like what Catherine is doing of going to an event and not volunteering. But I don't know who put together volunteer Meta and how it's structured, but could there be a different section, or use the structure that volunteer Meta already has there to kind of create a part 2 or a adjacent, or I don't know how it's done, something that so we wouldn't have to recreate a resource that already exists, but it would have to be, people would have to know that they can go there, even if they're not volunteering, like go there for other things.
Yeah.
When
Cool.
you say volunteer Met How, are you talking about Met How at home, or is it something else?
No. Volunteer Meta is its own website that where event or where organizations post where they need volunteers, and you can go sign up for it. So it's a way that
I see. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Meadow
So I was just thinking maybe use the same structure.
Meadow at Home has also talked at various times about strengthening community connections so that people are more aware of what each other are doing, and using those. I mean, having somebody from the East Chewik be my traveling buddy makes a lot more sense than going over to Wolf Creek.
Right.
If I'm going to a movie, and those, that it also builds community. It also has, I mean, we've thought about it in terms of them, the Firewise community has certainly tried to help promote that concept of community coordination. And I think there's the potential for doing it around transportation as well. We haven't gotten very far with Meadow at Home in trying to make that work. And more ideas and other brains, I think, would be really welcome to hear other people's thoughts and strategies about how to really strengthen that concept.
Yeah, it seems one idea I've had would be just figuring out like how having somebody that spearheads their neighborhood. So like having somebody be an ambassador that just like collects phone numbers or emails of people that are interested and kind of keeps it going and monitors it, and something like that, where you could be an ambassador to help foster it or get the list going, or go talk to your neighborhood and see if they're interested in joining the list. And maybe it's just transportation, or maybe it has other pieces, like in the city there's like block parties, and it has multiple pieces, but that's one thing that comes to mind, is having somebody kind of sign up to rally their neighborhood. Yeah, and that based off of the could work for rides, could work for a lot of different things that would promote resiliency. I mean, thinking about during fires or natural disasters, or like if you had a list or email. I know actually in my Mazama neighborhood, there was an email thread that was going on just during the fires to give people updates and that kind of thing. And then it kind of peters off when there's not fires. But what if that was revived for other uses?
Or little small text groups, that makes it pretty easy. Anyone want to go to this movie tonight kind of thing.
Right.
I think also, I'm not a giant lover of Zoom, right? It's better to be in person, but honestly, Zoom does also lower our emissions when we can have meetings and not go get in our car.
Amen for that. I think that's true. And it's very quickly, it's very, the transportation time is very short.
The MetroNet buffering is your transportation time.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, in
And
the,
you don't have to dress up.
For sure.
in the cities, there's these companies that have, cars that anybody can, you can sort of be part of a
Oh,
network, like Zip Cars and all
Mhm.
these different, I've seen a lot of these things, but it would be kind of cool if a company would be willing to have a few cars up here, electric cars, so that, if people had to do a 50-mile drive to Omak or Wenatchee or something like that, they could essentially borrow the electric car.
Hmm.
And, these companies already have, the whole organizational infrastructure built up for insurance and all that kind of stuff. I just wonder if that could be explored, like a pilot or something.
It's a great idea.
Sure. That's
You
a
want to
great
be the ambassador, George?
It
Yeah.
sounds pretty highfalutin. Kind of like it. Kind of like it, Gudrun.
Okay.
Well, I want to be mindful of time. Does anybody else have any kind of last thoughts or ideas that you want to make sure to share before we wrap up?
Thank you.
Thank you. It's fun.
Yes,
It's like,
thanks, Dana.
yeah, it's fun getting in the mindset of problem solving rather than thinking about, okay, how can we all experience this? How can we improve this?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe if anybody is interested in being a part of making those benches happen, who should we connect with?
Yeah, you can email me. I'll put my email in the chat. You can, I think, Carolyn knows more than I do about the specific Metro at home rides and that, thinking about scheduling around the ophthalmology. But yeah, if you're interested in kind of working on the next steps of where this goes or what it looks like, definitely let me know. And yeah, Ellen, if you need a buddy for your first Trango ride, I can bike from Mazama to Winthrop. And then,
I think I could maybe persuade someone to go with me.
There we go.
I can actually do it by myself.
Yeah.
It's more fun with.
Well, I think it's not a bad idea. I think it would not be a bad idea at all for there to be like informal event for people to all take the Trango bus together.
Hey, that's
to like
a good
create
idea.
a group to like do it once.
Yeah.
Because it's good once you've done it once, you have a little understanding of it. So
Let's go all up to the Mazama store and have cappuccino and some of their wonderful pastry.
I'll do it. Yeah.
Vote for that.
It doesn't.
That would be fun. That would be actually
Go there
awesome.
yet, but
Yeah, ice cream, smoothie, something.
Yeah,
like a
whatever.
destination.
Yeah.
Love that.
John Jumper won't take us to Mazama either, huh? It doesn't go all the way up there, does it?
You know, John Jumper would, if you, it's not, you basically have to call the ride, the number there, and you can ask, you can say, I'd like to go up to, I think it would take you up to Mazama. I think so. I'll ask him. I see him twice a week.
Cool. Great. Cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody.
Meadow at home riding Trango though. And
Pardon me?
going to the bakery or going to Sherry's or to someplace.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a little Met How at Home event.
Yeah.
That would
I
be
like
fun.
that. We'll do one south and one north. Okay.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
I'll put it on my action items.
Hey,
But remember, we have to get home again. So we have to go north and south.
Right.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
that's good. Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
Bring your dollar.
Yep.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. Darn, I have to remember that.
All right.
I just want to say really quick, if anybody does have any questions about EVs, I am making that FAQ sheet and your questions do matter, hence my frequently asked questions sheet. So if you do have anything that you want to know about EVs, just feel free to email me. I will drop my email in the chat, but yeah.
Awesome.
All
Great,
right.
Emily.
Emily. Yeah, thanks to our Western interns. You always bring such a great influx of energy and ideas into the Valley every summer. I just really, really appreciate you being here. And thank you so much, Dana, for your effort, and Carolyn for being a part of the group. And thanks, Dana, for this presentation today, and everyone for being here and your great ideas.
Good session.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Really
you.
great to meet you. Have a great evening.